Welcome. Today we are going to start a new series, The Serial Killers and Mass Murderers Iceberg. I was thinking of covering it in one big video, but seeing the first layer being over 20 minutes long, I decided to make each layer its own video and then a big video with all of the layers at the end. The Iceberg was made by 777. Theodore Robert Bundy, an American serial killer active primarily in the 1970s, confessed to 30 murders across 7 states after initially denying his crimes. Bundy used charm to deceive his victims and authorities, often feigning injuries or posing as an authority figure to lure victims into his vehicle before assaulting and killing them. He engaged in gruesome acts such as revisiting and desecrating the corpses of his victims, decapitating some, and keeping their heads as trophies. Bundy was arrested in 1975 for kidnapping, leading to suspicions and other unsolved homicides. He escaped custody twice, committing more crimes before his final capture. Bundy was executed in 1989, with biographers describing him as a sadistic sociopath who derived pleasure from the suffering of others. Charles Millis Manson, an American criminal and cult leader, founded the Manson family, a cult based in California during the late 1960s. Several members of the cult committed a series of murders in July and August 1969, leading to Manson's conviction in 1971 for first-degree murder and conspiracy. Despite never directly ordering the murders, Manson's ideology was deemed a form of conspiracy by the prosecution. Prior to his criminal activities, Manson had a history of incarceration and pursued a music career on the fringes of the Los Angeles music scene. He harbored a fascination with the Beatles and their album released in 1968, adopting the term helter-skelter to describe an impending apocalyptic race war. While Manson claimed innocence regarding the murders, the prosecution argued his intent to start a race war. John Wayne Gacy, an American serial killer and sex offender, perpetrated at least 33 murders of young men and boys in Norwood Park Township, near Chicago, Illinois. Dubbed the Killer Clown for his prior public performances as a clown, Gacy committed his crimes inside his own home, where he would lure victims under false pretenses, restrain them with handcuffs, and then torture and murder them. Many victims were buried on his property, while others were disposed of in a nearby river. Despite a prior conviction for sodomy in 1968, Gacy escalated to murder in 1972 and continued his crimes prolifically thereafter. His arrest in 1978 came after an investigation into the disappearance of a Des Plaines teenager. Gacy was convicted for 33 murders, receiving the death penalty, and was executed by lethal injection in 1994. David Richard Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam and the .44 caliber killer, is an American serial killer who pleaded guilty to 8 shootings in New York City starting in July 1976. Using a .44 caliber revolver, he killed 6 people and wounded 7 others, sparking a widespread manhunt. Berkowitz taunted the police with letters and eluded capture until his arrest in August 1977. He initially claimed to be following orders from a demon, but later admitted it was a hoax. Berkowitz received 6 consecutive life sentences and became a media sensation. Son of Sam laws were enacted to prevent criminals from profiting from their crimes. Despite later claiming involvement in a satanic cult, a new investigation in the 1990s yielded inconclusive results. The Zodiac Killer is the moniker of an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s, responsible for at least 5 murders and multiple attacks. Targeting young couples and a cab driver, the killer's taunting letters to newspapers, along with cryptic ciphers, garnered widespread attention. Despite numerous theories, the only publicly named suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, died in 1992. The case, described as one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in American history, continues to captivate the public and authorities, with investigations still open in various jurisdictions. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer and sex offender who murdered and dismembered 17 males between 1978 and 1991. His later crimes involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and preserving body parts. Despite being diagnosed with various mental disorders, Dahmer was deemed legally sane at his trial. He was convicted of 15 homicides in Wisconsin and received 15 life sentences. Additionally, he was sentenced to another life term for a murder in Ohio. Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate in 1994 while serving his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. Henry Lee Lucas, also known as the Confession Killer, was an American convicted murderer. While serving time for his crimes, he gained notoriety by falsely confessing to approximately 600 additional murders to Texas Rangers and other law enforcement officials. Many cases were closed based on these confessions, attributing numerous murders to Lucas. However, investigations later revealed that many of the murders he confessed to were impossible for him to have committed. The Attorney General of Texas concluded that Lucas was a fabulist who had falsely confessed. Despite being initially sentenced to death, his sentence was later commuted to life in prison. Lucas recanted his confessions, except for the murder of his mother, before his death in 2001. His case led to a reevaluation of police techniques and raised awareness of the possibility of false confessions, highlighting the need for greater caution and accountability in criminal investigations. Ottis Toole, an American serial killer, was convicted of 6 counts of murder, often making confessions that he later recanted. Similar to his associate Henry Lee Lucas, Toole's confessions led to murder convictions, but doubts arose regarding the authenticity of their claims. The discrediting of the case against Lucas raised questions about the credibility of both men as genuine serial killers. Some suggested they were compliant interviewees used by police to solve unsolved cases. Toole initially received death sentences, later commuted to life imprisonment. He died in prison from cirrhosis at age 49. Police attributed the 1981 murder of Adam Walsh to Toole based on recanted statements, supported by Lucas, despite Lucas's history of false confessions. Edmund Emil Kemper III, an American serial killer, was convicted of murdering 7 women and 1 girl between May 1972 and April 1973. At age 15, he also killed his paternal grandparents. Dubbed the co-ed killer, Kemper targeted female college students hitchhiking in Santa Cruz County, California. His murders involved necrophilia, decapitation, and dismemberment. Found sane and guilty at his 1973 trial, Kemper requested the death penalty, which was not available in California at the time. Instead, he received 8 concurrent life sentences and has since been incarcerated at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. Edward Theodore Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul, was an American murderer, suspected serial killer, and body snatcher. His crimes, committed in Plainfield, Wisconsin, gained notoriety in 1957 when authorities discovered he had exhumed corpses to fashion keepsakes from their bones and skin. Gein confessed to killing 2 women, Mary Hogan in 1954 and Bernice Wardens in 1957. Initially deemed unfit for trial, he was later judged competent and found guilty of Warden's murder, but was declared legally insane and confined to a psychiatric institution. Gein died from lung cancer at Mendota Mental Health Institute in 1984 at age 77. He was buried in Plainfield Cemetery in an unmarked grave next to his family. Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was an English serial killer convicted of murdering 13 women and attempting to murder 7 others between 1975 and 1980. Sentenced to life imprisonment, his term was later converted to a whole life order in 2010. Sutcliffe targeted women in residential areas and red light districts, citing a mission from God to kill prostitutes. Despite multiple interviews during the investigation, he evaded capture until his arrest in 1981. Sutcliffe's case prompted significant criticism of the police, leading to reforms in investigative procedures. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he was transferred to Broadmoor Hospital in 1984 and later to prison. In 2020, Sutcliffe died from COVID-19 and diabetes-related complications while in custody at the age of 74. Frederick Walter Stephen West was an English serial killer who, along with his second wife Rose West, committed at least 12 murders between 1967 and 1987 in Gloucestershire. Most victims were young women, subjected to bondage, torture, and mutilation. The West's residence became infamously known as the House of Horrors, where victims' bodies were dismembered and buried. Fred and Rose were arrested in 1994, with Fred later dying by suicide while awaiting trial in 1995. Rose was convicted of 10 murders in 1995 and sentenced to life imprisonment. Rosemary Pauline West, also involved in the murders, is currently serving her sentence at HM Prison New Hall in West Yorkshire. The Snowtown murders, also known as the Bodies in Barrels murders, occurred between August 1992 and May 1999 in and around Adelaide, South Australia. Perpetrated by John Justin Bunting, Robert Joe Wagner, and James Spiridon Vlasakis, with Mark Hayden convicted of assisting in body disposal, the crimes involved torturing and murdering individuals, mostly found in barrels in an abandoned bank vault in Snowtown. Motivated by beliefs instilled by Bunting, victims were targeted based on perceived vulnerabilities or characteristics such as pedophilia or homosexuality. While initially attracting tourism, the murders ultimately brought stigma to Snowtown, prompting discussions about changing the town's name. The case has been extensively documented in books and a critically acclaimed film released in 2011. Ivan Robert Marco Milat, known as the Backpacker Murderer, was an Australian serial killer who targeted backpackers in New South Wales between 1989 and 1992. His method involved offering transportation to travelers along the Hume Highway, then taking them to the Belanglo State Forest, where he would assault, rob, and murder them. Milat is believed to have committed additional similar crimes and murders across Australia. The Boston Strangler is the moniker for the perpetrator of 13 murders of women in Greater Boston during the early 1960s. Albert DeSalvo was attributed as the murderer based on his confession, details revealed in court during a separate case, and DNA evidence linking him to the final victim. However, prior to the emergence of DNA evidence, speculation arose that the murders, also known as the Silk Stocking murders, may have been committed by more than one person. Eric David Harris and Dylan Bennett Klebold were American high school seniors who carried out the Columbine High School massacre in Columbine, Colorado, on April 20, 1999. They killed 12 students, one teacher, and wounded 24 others before dying by self-inflicted gunshot wounds. The event sparked a media frenzy and led to Columbine becoming synonymous with school shootings, making it one of the most infamous mass shootings in U.S. history. Harris and Klebold met in 7th grade and grew increasingly close, eventually becoming inseparable by junior year. While reports vary on their social standing at Columbine High School, they began planning the attack nearly a year in advance, meticulously building explosives and gathering weapons. Their writings and videos foreshadowed the massacre and outlined their motives, although much of this evidence has not been released by authorities. Despite various theories attributing factors like bullying, mental illness, and media influences, the exact motive remains inconclusive. Harris and Klebold have since become pop culture icons, inspiring a fan base known as Columbiners, while some individuals have expressed sympathy or admiration for them. The Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting occurred on December 14, 2012, in Newtown, Connecticut, when 20-year-old Adam Lanza shot and killed 26 people, including 20 children aged 6 to 7 and 6 adult staff members. Prior to the school shooting, Lanza fatally shot his mother at their home. He then took his own life as first responders arrived at the school. This incident stands as the deadliest mass shooting in Connecticut history and the deadliest at an elementary school in U.S. history. Following the tragedy, there was a nationwide debate on gun control, with proposals for universal background checks and new legislation to ban certain types of firearms and magazines. Investigations concluded that Lanza acted alone and had planned his actions, but did not provide clear motives for his actions or why he targeted the school. Reports indicated that Lanza had Asperger's syndrome and mental health issues, but these were not deemed direct causes of his actions, which were attributed to a combination of mental health problems, an obsession with violence, and access to deadly weapons. Seung-Hui Cho, a South Korean immigrant, perpetrated the Virginia Tech shooting on April 16, 2007, killing 32 people and injuring 17 others with two semi-automatic pistols. Cho, a senior undergraduate student at Virginia Tech, died by suicide as police breached the doors of Norris Hall, where most of the shooting occurred. Diagnosed with severe anxiety and major depressive disorder since middle school, Cho had a history of therapy and special education support. He was bullied in high school and exhibited concerning behavior in college, including references to violence in his writings. Following the shootings, a panel criticized educators and mental health professionals for failing to notice Cho's deteriorating condition. The panel also faulted misinterpretations of privacy laws, gaps in mental health systems, and Virginia Tech administrators for not taking immediate action after initial deaths. Cho was deemed primarily responsible for the killings despite his mental health challenges. Charles Joseph Whitman, dubbed the Texas Tower Sniper, perpetrated a mass murder on August 1, 1966. He first killed his mother and wife with knives before heading to the University of Texas at Austin armed with multiple firearms. Inside the university's main building, he fatally shot 3 people before ascending to the 28th floor observation deck of the clock tower. Over 96 minutes, he indiscriminately shot at people, killing 11 and injuring 31 more. Austin police officers ultimately shot and killed Whitman. One victim died 35 years later from injuries sustained in the attack, bringing the total death toll to 17. Nikolas Jacob Cruz, an American mass murderer, perpetrated the Parkland High School shooting on February 14, 2018, where he killed 17 people and injured 17 others. In 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for his role in the incident, marking it as the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history. Cruz had a history of behavioral issues dating back to preschool, and as a teenager, he shared his fixation on mass shootings and expressed hateful views on social media. Despite this, he legally acquired firearms before the shooting. The Dunblane Massacre occurred on March 13, 1996, at Dunblane Primary School in Scotland, when Thomas Hamilton, aged 43, shot and killed 16 pupils, 1 teacher, and injured 15 others before taking his own life. It remains the deadliest mass shooting in British history. In response, there was widespread public demand for stricter gun control laws, leading to the 1996 Cullen Report and the Snowdrop Petition. This resulted in the implementation of 2 Firearms Acts that effectively banned private ownership of most handguns in Great Britain, with exceptions. Since then, there have been no mass shootings involving handguns in the UK, although incidents with other firearms have occurred. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, was an American serial killer and sex offender whose crime spree occurred in California from June 1984 to August 1985. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 1989, but died in 2013 while awaiting execution. Ramirez's troubled childhood, marked by abuse and exposure to macabre influences, contributed to his violent behavior. His crimes included murders and burglaries, terrorizing residents of Greater Los Angeles and later the San Francisco Bay Area. He used various weapons and methods to attack his victims, showing cruelty and sadism. Ramirez was convicted of multiple charges and never expressed remorse for his actions. He died of complications from B-cell lymphoma. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who operated in London's Whitechapel district in 1888. His victims were predominantly women working as prostitutes in the impoverished East End. The killer's modus operandi typically involved cutting their throats before mutilating their abdomens, leading to speculation about anatomical knowledge. The name Jack the Ripper originated from a letter, believed to be a hoax, sent to the press. Despite extensive media coverage and public fascination, the killer was never apprehended. The murders remain unsolved, and the case has become a blend of historical research, folklore, and pseudohistory, captivating public interest for decades. Dennis Lynn Rader, also known as BDK, is an American serial killer who murdered at least 10 people in Kansas between 1974 and 1991. His victims, primarily women, were bound and suffocated or strangled. Rader stole personal items from his victims and sent taunting letters to police and media outlets, detailing his crimes. After a 13-year hiatus, he resumed communication in 2004, leading to his arrest in 2005. Rader pleaded guilty and is serving 10 consecutive life sentences. The Moors murders, perpetrated by Ian Brady and Myra Hindley between 1963 and 1965 in Manchester, England, claimed the lives of 5 children, aged 10 to 17. The victims were assaulted, and their bodies were found buried on Saddleworth Moor. Brady and Hindley were convicted for 3 murders, but later confessed to all 5. Despite extensive searches, one victim's body remains undiscovered. Hindley died in prison in 2002 after serving 36 years, while Brady, diagnosed as a psychopath, spent 51 years in confinement until his death in 2017. The case received significant media attention, with the perpetrators dubbed 2 sadistic killers of the utmost depravity by the trial judge. Paul Kenneth Bernardo, known as the Scarborough and the Schoolgirl Killer, is a Canadian serial and killer. Operating in Scarborough, Ontario, between 1987 and 1990, he later committed 3 murders with his former wife, Karla Homolka, earning them the moniker Ken and Barbie Killers. Their victims included Karla's sister, Tammy Homolka. Bernardo was sentenced to life imprisonment and declared a dangerous offender, ensuring his likely permanent incarceration. He confessed to additional crimes, and Homolka received a reduced sentence for testifying against him as part of a controversial plea deal. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe so you can be notified when the next video drops.